Welcome to the Commissioner's Corner Show for December of 2017. We're going to wrap up the year here with a big episode. I'm your host, Scott Vargo, Summit County Manager, and I'm joined by two of your three county commissioners, Dan Gibbs and Karin Stiegelmeier. Our third county commissioner, Thomas Davidson, is out of town this week, visiting Washington, D.C. for a conference of some sort. I don't know, you guys know the details about that one?
It's One Colorado, isn't it?
One Colorado?
Yeah, Victory Fund.
Victory Fund. All right. So Thomas is out just for a couple of days. Unfortunately, we had limited time to get in the last episode of the year, so we're going shorthanded. We want to talk about fire and water in our first segment today. So stay tuned there. All of these have themes. So fire and water is the first one. We're going to talk about some wildfire code amendments that we're looking at within our land use code. So we started this process some time ago, went through some revisions, and now they're coming back in front of the county commissioners. We wanted to certainly move this forward as quickly as we could, considering the wildfire activity that the country has seen, and certainly that we've seen in Summit County with the Peak 2 fire last year. And so we think it's very important to get this information into our code. So Dan,
Sure.
You want to start off?
Yeah, I mean, the goal really is to have, we've had a community wildfire protection plan in place. I want to say, originally they had an Upper Blue CWPP back, I want to say in 2005-ish, but we've had ours since about 2006, 2007. And that's been kind of a blueprint, if you will, with limited resources, where we should focus our attention in terms of defensible space, in terms of critical infrastructure that we have in our community, whether it's reservoirs, where people live, or telecommunication centers, you name it. And so the goal of what we're looking at is trying to mirror and have our CWPP kind of overlap well with our countywide comprehensive plan and our building codes. They all kind of do a little bit different things. And especially in the wake, as you mentioned, of the fires that we had in Summit County, having documents that overlap each other and complement each other well, instead of having conflicting provisions in those various different documents is really important. So I'm really excited as we discuss this, and it's been a public process where we've discussed it in our work sessions. Eventually down the road it'll be coming before us, I believe, in our afternoon meetings. But I mean, it's looking at everything from when you have new developments on creating defensible space, having zones 1, 2, and I believe 3 in some situations, materials that are used for building, making sure that there's adequate storage for everything from firewood to just anything really that's combustible. And so we've worked closely with our fire districts on these proposals, and I'm excited to see how it shakes out, I guess.
And I think that the builders and the realtors and so on, there's been a lot of outreach from the community development departments within county government to get feedback on what was being proposed and get a comfort level with those groups as well.
Yeah, it's been really important to do outreach with them, and they've given us some great feedback, and I think staff has incorporated a lot of their initial concerns. So. Good. I think eventually when we see something before us, hopefully it's something that the whole community supports, really.
Yeah, great. Well, certainly, again, important considering what we've seen here locally, and again, some of the horrendous fire activity that we saw this summer in other parts of the country as well. And certainly we don't want to find ourselves in that position. Karin, anything else you'd like to add on that one?
Well, like anything that we do, changing codes, it applies to new development. And if you do some major remodel on your home, then you may find yourself in a position where that tree that's leaning up against your living room wall is going to have to go because it's a big fire danger. So a lot of it really is, at this point, common sense. I think 15 years ago, we were in a very different place, and people loved their trees and wouldn't consider cutting down a tree that is a big fire danger. But I think we've come a long way.
Yeah.
And at this point, people understand that having those very combustible vegetation trees, bushes, whatever, very close to the home is really dangerous, and could make the difference between the fire department saying, we're not even going to try to save that home, we're going to go to this other home. So we've all learned a lot.
Yeah, we've certainly seen from different events where these sorts of strategies have been implemented, where you do have the defensible space. You can see in neighborhoods where the home that did that is still standing, and the homes around it are not. And so lots of new information and lots of, I guess, new science around fire behavior and what we can expect here in Summit County. We've seen a much later fire season than we had historically. We'd seen fires in the past couple of Octobers, which was very unusual for us. And so again, things are changing, and I think it's great that you guys are taking some action to put some codes and regulation in place around that as well.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of wildland firefighters that have seen themselves in situations where they're scratching their heads saying, like, why? Who allowed this house to be built in this location without any areas where a fire truck can turn around, or just like very basic safety issues. So that's another part of our plan to look through a lens of wildfire preparedness in our community when we approve new developments.
Good, excellent. All right, to the water portion of our segment now. We're going to talk about things that are in the water. So the first one are aquatic nuisance species. And so, Karin, you want to take the lead on that one?
Yeah, I think most people may have heard the really frightening news that we had the villagers in Green Mountain Reservoir. That is the larval form of the zebra quagga mussels. And so at this point in time, we're not considered infested, but the villagers were found in the water. And it's really frightening because if they do take over, then it destroys the ecosystem. They're filtering organisms, they filter out all the nutrients, so there's nothing left at the base of the food chain for anything to live. So it destroys the fishery, it destroys the ecosystem, and it's extremely costly. We're talking about billions of dollars that is spent every year to clean out these quagga zebra mussels from hydropower. The most obvious one for us is Lake Powell, and one of the interesting statistics I got today on a phone call with a lot of stakeholders around the state trying to figure out what to do about this issue is that in Green Mountain, about 48% of the boats that are there have also visited Lake Powell. So we have these prevention programs at all of our reservoirs, but there is a big problem with funding for the prevention and monitoring. So what we're looking at this year is a bill that will go through the State House. It was unanimous from the Water Interim Committee to put this through, and that is, it will require a sticker, an ANS, Aquatic Nuisance Species sticker, on all boats, $25 fee, and a $50 fee for out-of-state boats. At this point in time, we don't even have anything like that for out-of-state boats, and all of our in-state people are paying those out-of-state fees when they go to Lake Powell or somewhere else. So this would be a way to have a good funding stream to be able to do these programs. In the past, we've relied on severance taxes, and those are not reliable. They've gone up and down. So we're all hopeful around the state that this will go through and will provide about half the funding that's needed to provide all these inspection stations around the state.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, this is, there's almost an interesting correlation between this issue and wildfires, where in many cases you put limited amount of resources on the preventative side, and then you look at what happens after. Wildfires can cost $1 million a day, and defensible space is much more affordable. And if the state puts some resources, or the feds, on basic boat inspections, and we wouldn't have billions of dollars of challenges on the back end once lakes and streams get impacted.
We'll talk in a little bit in another segment about mentors and Mountain Mentors as a program. Again, prevention program. Put some dollars in up front, you save lots of money down the road. And so again, it's a very reactive environment, unfortunately, rather than being proactive. So these are a couple of examples of hopefully where we can get involved before the problem becomes too grave. All right, last item. We're way over time, so thanks for sticking around in this segment. So one other thing that's in our water, molybdenum in varying concentrations, and so there was a request that came from Climax Molybdenum, Freeport McMoran, and wanting to change that standard statewide. And so, Karin, you want to talk a little bit about what that process was and then what the outcome has been so far?
This is another prevention item. So we're looking carefully at what the impact of an increased standard would be, working with many, many stakeholders. So there are many water districts within Summit County and way beyond, as well as stakeholders actually all around the country and the world that could be impacted by the standard that's set by Colorado because of molybdenum mining.
See, I did really well. I was shocked that I managed to get it out. So.
doesn't occur in that many places around the world. This is one of the best ore bodies in the world that we have right here. And they have been wonderful stewards and wonderful community partners. And so they were the ones that paid for the studies that were done at CSU. And the studies that were done were really good, and they were peer-reviewed. They were excellent studies, but they just were not adequate to address all the broad-ranging questions that we have about what the impact might be on human health. We're concerned about babies and young people, and there was no testing of that. There was no testing regarding pregnancy, and there's a lot of science behind all this. So we still have a lot of questions about whether this is at all reasonable. And again, we're looking at prevention, human health, as well as it impacts agriculture, specifically raising cattle. So the people in Grand County have big concerns there.
Yeah, and I believe the current law or allowances, I believe 210 parts per million per liter.
Micrograms per liter.
And then the proposal is to go up to 9,000, I believe, and that's for drinking water. But then there's a different component for ag.
Yep.
But as Karin mentioned, gathering as much information as possible, and just having everything double checked.
Yep.
We definitely, this region doesn't necessarily want to be a testing ground, if you will, but we just want to make sure that whatever that number should be safe for humans and animals. So.
And so at this point, the state has postponed the hearing that was going to take place coming up in December this month. They've postponed it to November of 2019. And so essentially 2 years, that will allow some more peer review to take place on the studies that have taken place and perhaps some other follow-up studies or other activity before any sort of a decision would be made. So that's sort of where we stand. There is a sort of temporary relaxation or adjustment to the standard that goes through December of 2018, and it's likely that there'll be consideration of extending that through the November of 19 date. Is what I've heard. So any other differences?
Yeah, it's the Water Quality Control Commission that's a state body. It's not federal, it's a state body looking at this. And so it's been delayed because we need a lot more information.
So that's where that one stands. And again, there are a number of different articles and information that's been put out related to this one. It has certainly garnered a fair amount of attention statewide. So, all right, so we are way over time. So we will take a quick break and then come back and talk about some other stuff.